If you thought the Democratic Party was dead, think again. In the first election since Donald Trump took office a second time, Democrats swept elections in Virginia and New Jersey by much bigger margins than the polls were showing. And they also had gains in other races in referenda and state legislatures. What are the voters telling us about the public mood and the state of the Trump presidency? Plus, New York City elects a socialist mayor.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome, I'm Paul Gigot here on Potomac Watch, and I'm joined by Kim Strassel and Kyle Peterson. So big, huge victories in New Jersey and Virginia for the Democrats. Let's listen to Mikey Sherrill, the victorious Democrat in New Jersey, talk about the results.
We're going to follow Lady Liberty's beacon. We're not going to give in to our darker impulses. Here in New Jersey, we know that this nation has not ever been, nor will it ever be, ruled by kings. We take oaths to a constitution, not a king. We've chosen liberty, the very foundation of democracy, and we've chosen prosperity necessary to create opportunity for all.
Well, geez, who does she mean when she was talking about a king? Clearly a message delivered at Donald Trump. And as her campaign did, she ran forthrightly against Trump, tried to link her opponent, Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican, who had only lost 4 years ago by 3 points. And she won by 13 points. It's a remarkable change. And some of the county results are even more striking. Monmouth County, which is a Republican county. Kyle, you're a New Jersey guy. The margin was 18 points for the Republicans 4 years ago, just 9 this time. Middlesex County is a Democratic county. 12 points 4 years ago, 25 points this time. It's a real rout in the state. And they also gained seats in the state legislature, the state house. So they're not going to have the Democrats are going to have veto-proof majorities again.
Yeah, I mean, the story here, to my eye in New Jersey, seems to be huge Democratic enthusiasm. Blue areas get bluer, purple areas turn blue, and red areas get less red. So I was looking at some of these counties. Essex County, that's Newark, was 72 Harris last year, 76% Sherrill. One county over, Morris County, that's a suburban area, that was right. 50% Trump, now 50% Sherrill. One more county over, Sussex County, that is the northwest portion of New Jersey, was 62 Trump and only 59% for Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican challenger. So, I mean, it is hard to overcome that kind of margin. I think New Jersey was always going to be an uphill race for Republicans, not only because of the fundamental dynamics of the state, but also the fact that these odd year elections tend to swing against the party in power in the White House. Remember?
Yeah, but this is big, Kyle. I mean, yeah, that's all true, but this is a big, big swing.
Yes, absolutely. Always an uphill swing, but it was. I mean, some of the polls suggested Ciattarelli was within striking distance, and the outcome here suggests that not even close.
Well, Kim, one of the striking things to me in the exit polls was that New Jersey voters said the state economy stinks. And Democrats have been running the place for 8 years, and they still said, well, we're not going to give it to Ciattarelli, which suggests to me that this was the Democratic voters here were really voting against what has been going on in Washington and Donald Trump. They came out in great enthusiasm against Trump.
Yeah, I think, look, a couple of things are going on here. And you're right. If you dig into those polls, the number one thing that comes up is New Jersey voters very unhappy about electricity costs. Nearly 60% of them said it was a major problem. Property taxes. Okay. Never mind that all of those policies were instituted by the Democrats that they just returned to office. Okay.
Yes. With enhanced majorities.
With enhanced majorities, right. Including, Mikey Sherrill, who essentially said, I'm not really going to do anything about electricity costs. And so it's mesmerizing, but it says so much, Paul, about two things. One, this was a great way that the whole King speech that you just heard Sherrill make it's a great way to motivate your base. And we saw that in huge numbers. They came out and they came back home, including suburban voters who Democrats have been making gains with. That softened a little bit in the last election. Now they're back in force, including minority voters. The same thing. You'd seen some peeling off there with Trump on the ballot last year. They all came home. And then you look into independent and more moderate voters and Republican voters. And what you see is that not only are they unhappy about electricity costs and property taxes in New Jersey, but they generally are just sour and grumpy about the cost of living and inflation in general. And you know who they blame for that? They don't blame Democrats. They don't blame Phil Murphy, the governor in New Jersey. They blame the Republicans who are in control in Washington. And if Republicans do not walk away from this election understanding that they have a major problem, that they are now being blamed for the hangover of the Biden economy, which they have not fixed to the degree that they could, they are missing a canary that is warbling so loud in this coal mine.
Yeah, let's look at Virginia. Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat from the Richmond area, won by 15 points. Of course, the last time Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, won by, I think, 2 or 3. But this was a historic Democratic rout in Virginia. The margin in Loudoun County, I think you know something about that, Kim, 29 points this year, had been only 11 4 years ago. Prince William County, 15 4 years ago, 34 this time. So it's clear that, and by the way, the Democrats won 13 seats at least in the House of Delegates, which means that their narrow majority of 1 or 2 seats is now going to be getting close to a supermajority.
And Jay Jones, Paul, can I just throw that in there? Jay Jones.
Jay Jones, the Attorney General candidate who had mused in texts about killing one of his political opponents. The Democrats somehow, so what? You know, we just got to paste one on Republicans in this partisan era. So, yeah, well, okay, at least he didn't pull the trigger. Thank heavens for that. But this was the other two other things that's interesting about this vote in Virginia. They did this despite the fact that the approval rating for Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, is about 56%. And Virginians in the exit polls said that the economy, Kim, is actually good in Virginia. It's 58%. Yep. But so you've got people think the economy stinks in New Jersey. We're still going to vote for Democrats. We think it's really good in Virginia. We're still going to vote for Democrats. So, it's when they're blaming it all on the Washington Republicans.
Yeah. I think this again, this says something about how much people are focusing their issues on Washington. I think in this particular case, though, Paul, too, it says something about Winsome Earl Sears's campaign in that there's some actually phenomenal statistics here showing that she ran a campaign that was almost entirely focused. It was a little bit of a loose cannon, but a lot of it was really focused on cultural issues. For instance, she made a big deal about talking about transgender questions in sports. This worked very well for Republicans last year. But there's some really interesting data showing that while significant numbers of voters agreed that this was a major problem, portions of those, and notable portions of those, nonetheless voted for Abigail Spanberger because the economy was more important than them. And in a way, you can look at this Republican campaign and really feel as though she kind of threw away that Youngkin legacy. He'd really, really over the last 4 years had this laser-focused agenda on economic performance. It's showing through in Virginia. She was not able to capitalize on that at all. And I think what ought to also really concern Republicans is it's not just that Spanberger really ran up her margins among all of those furloughed workers who are in counties like Loudoun and Fairfax right outside of DC, but you look to South Virginia too, which tends to be a Republican stronghold. And she increased her gains there as well, too. And this is an area not as much affected by the shutdown. It's not such a big issue. But again, really feeling wider economic effects and blaming national Republicans for it.
The president's approval rating in those two states, 42%, I think, in the end in New Jersey, and roughly the same in Virginia. That's bad. That's low. And the Real Clear Politics average for Trump approvals rating nationwide 43.4 now. So that is, I think, signaling the reaction against President Trump. Let's listen to the president respond to the result.
If you read the pollsters, the shutdown was a big factor, negative for the Republicans. And that was a big factor. And they say that I wasn't on the ballot was the biggest factor. But I don't know about that. But I was honored that they said that.
Well, it wasn't on the ballot. That's true. Some of the Trump partisans did not show up for other Republicans. That's been a pattern when Donald Trump hasn't been on the ballot since he first entered the political scene, going back to 2017, 2018, and other times. But there's a couple of survey here result on inflation. The president is 25 points underwater on inflation, and he's about 12 points. This is nationwide, underwater on the economy. Those are the reasons, as Kim suggested, he won in 2024.
Right.
And now the Democrats, by running on affordability, focusing on that, jettisoning the transgender stuff, not talking about immigration except to say, well, maybe the president's going a little too far in deportations, but we agree he should fix the border, abandoning many of the things that Biden stressed and Harris stressed. They're focusing on affordability, and it's become a Republican liability.
Right. And he's, instead of focusing on those questions, inflation and whatnot, doing things that polarize and amp up these voters in these blue and purple suburban areas, sending the National Guard to the big cities, tweeting AI generated images of himself. And I won't detail all the what was in that video, but I think that's a real problem if you're a Republican candidate who is trying to focus on the affordability issue, which, to his credit, I think Jack Ciattarelli was pretty good on that in New Jersey.
He was good on it.
Making an issue out of the state's rising electricity costs, putting that at the feet of the Democratic leaders of the state and their green policies, their blocking of natural gas pipelines into the state. But the difficulty is, if you are facing that kind of broader political undertow for your party, you have to work really hard to overcome a little bit of it, much less a lot of it. And to add another point on Jay Jones and the incumbent Attorney General of Republican in Virginia, Jason Miyares. I mean, he had the problem also of a Republican nominee at the top of the ticket, the gubernatorial ticket, who was not focused and not really making it a race. And in this era of turnout elections instead of split ticket voting and persuasion, he could only overcome a certain amount of that. And it looks like he just got swamped by this surge of Democratic enthusiasm.
So let's talk about what this foretells before we get to the New York City mayor's race. Kim, what does this tell us about the midterm elections? Look at California. Governor Gavin Newsom's referendum passed overwhelmingly. That will that will ratify his legislature's gerrymander that could cost Republicans, I think, about 5 seats. That will offset whatever gains Republicans have in Texas. But more than that, what is this enthusiasm for the Democrats and the president's low approval rating foretell for next year? Because I think it means big trouble for keeping the House, and it might just put the Senate in play.
Yeah, there are some real national consequences here, and some of them are immediate. For one thing, I would just point out there's some talk now that this Democratic win, big victory, could in fact inspire the party to continue their shutdown longer. So that's a possible consequence. You just mentioned California. By the way, the huge gains in the Virginia state legislature, the House of Delegates, is likely to enable Democrats to pull off what would kind of have been otherwise a pretty tricky maneuver to rewrite their own map, where they may squeeze out another 2 or 3 seats on the Democratic side. And so they needed to be able to they passed something already. They have to keep control of the legislature to be able to do it again, according to their constitution, next year. But now they'll be able to do that. So that is one of the consequences. But if you look at what this really means, so you've got the gerrymandering part of it, in which, in part because of last night's elections gains, Democrats are going to be more in with a chance to erase some of the Republican gerrymandering gains. It's already a very tight House, as we know. Republicans had been looking forward to a Senate map where they had some people that they hoped that they could knock off, but it's going to be hard to do that in some of these statewide races. I would mention, for instance, in Georgia, we actually had a couple of Democrats flip seats on the Georgia Public Utilities Commission. This is one of the first times in decades that Democrats have won a statewide seat in Georgia. Obviously, Georgia is a Senate seat. By the way, John Ossoff is one of the Democrats who are up for re-election next year. What does that say about the Republican potential to keep their Senate majority or add to their Senate majority? And definitely, what does it say about the House? And this is why I think the message here for Republicans, they need to be looking at this and questioning Trump's tariffs and what they're doing for economic uncertainty and costs out there. What they do with reconciliation, because their last bill did not include enough pro-growth policies, and what they're going to do about healthcare, because that was another big concern on voters' minds. It showed up in the polls. That is resonating, and the GOP is still out there kind of floundering around, saying, we don't really have a plan for dealing with rising Obamacare costs. They're starting to get their act together on it. But I think this is a little bit reminder, maybe you need to do a little bit more for people lately if you want to be put back into office.
Republicans hold the Senate with a 53-47 majority, if you count independents who vote for Democrats, Kyle. I think John Ossoff is not going to be beaten. That's my message. That's what my takeaway from this election. I think that Susan Collins, as good a candidate as she is for the state of Maine, is going to be in trouble running against it's going to have a hard time running against the governor of Maine, who's going to be running, Janet Mills. And I think the Ohio open seat to fill J.D. Vance's seat, now that he's vice president, is going to be hard to win. So I think it's not a foregone conclusion that the Republicans will hold the Senate coming out of this kind of vote. Now, obviously, we're a year away. A lot can change. Events are always in the saddle, as we like to say. But I think the Republicans, as Kim suggests, really do need to understand the nature of this wave that hit this week and that is likely to hit next week in terms of Democratic enthusiasm, unless Republicans can do more to pick up independents and the voters that they lost this time. All right, let's turn to the New York City mayor's race. Zohran Mamdani won with 50% of the vote, got over 50%. Let's listen to him as he made his victory speech, which is a little different than Mikey Sherrill's.
Together, we will usher in a generation of change. And if we embrace this brave new course, rather than fleeing from it, we can respond to oligarchy and authoritarianism with the strength it fears, not the appeasement it craves. After all, if anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him. And if there is any way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power. This is not only how we stop Trump, it's how we stop the next one. So, Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
So much for turning the volume of American politics down. The question I had listening to that was, is he running for president in 2028? Because he's clearly running against Donald Trump. And that's part of I think the wave that he took advantage of. Now that he's going to be mayor as of January 1st, he of course has to govern. And the contrast of his message, his agenda, with the Spanberger and Sherrill messages, not necessarily their agenda. The agendas might be closer because they're both more progressive, have more progressive record than their rhetoric and their campaigns this year. But the contrast is, if you're looking for a Democratic model that can win, is going to be notable going into the next year.
Yeah, it does present the Democratic Party with a choice. And Mamdani in that speech suggesting he is not backing away from any of his rhetoric on the campaign trail, quoting Eugene Debs, the 5-time socialist candidate for president in the United States early in the 20th century.
Yeah, I mean, I like to how many members of the audience actually even have ever heard about Eugene Debs. I mean, they don't teach history in American schools anymore. So how the hell do anybody know about Eugene Debs?
The challenge for him is going to be translating this into actual policy. The mayor's office of New York has control over some issues, not others. Maybe he can open up these city-run grocery stores without any profit and, use that to lower prices and spread the wealth around. I'm pretty skeptical.
I'm waiting for 50-cent avocados.
Well, the tariffs are a problem for you on the avocados for sure. But the challenge for Democratic primary voters is they are going to go to the ballot in these primaries and make their choices for 2026 before all of those experiments are going to be played out. But it does seem like the results on Tuesday offer a clear set of choices. I mean, there is a dynamic and galvanizing young socialist figure who has rode a wave of enthusiasm in New York City to the mayoralty, or you have these very cagey kind of centrist affecting figures in New Jersey and Virginia that have won these statewide races talking about affordability. And it will be fascinating to see how Senate voters and House primary voters think about those options, because there are definitely going to be other young candidates who are going to try to follow the Mamdani model.
And it poses a particular governance challenge, Kim, for Kathy Hochul, who is the governor of New York, and will have to deal now with the legislature, which is, I would call a progressive funhouse in Albany, and now Mamdani, who is going to essentially motivate a lot of those assemblymen and women to go even more further left. How does she handle that as she tries to navigate her own reelection race in next November? And she is likely to have a formidable challenger in Elise Stefanik, the congresswoman from upstate New York, who is disciplined, focused, is going to have a lot of money, and is very smart. And she is going to try to hang Mamdani and his governance, whether it's ill governance or not, around Kathy Hochul.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as Donald Trump is going to try to hang Mamdani around the broader Democratic Party neck. And I think Kathy Hochul, as you said, she's going to have a real handful here with Mamdani. He's going to be pushing, because remember too, a number of things that he wants to do cannot be done without the approval of the legislature, in particular questions of taxation. And so for as much as he's going to be focused on local issues, the things that he can manage to deal with, maybe buses and maybe education, policing, for instance, a lot of the broader things that he needs the money for to fund it is going to come from the legislature. So he just became her biggest political problem. But I think you're going to see this across the Democratic realm, Paul. And this is why I actually think the New York race is interesting. The New Jersey and Virginia races were, in some degree, referendums on Donald Trump. I mean, the Democrats made them so. This was more a statement on Mamdani. And he definitely put together a strong coalition of people who believe that money is or should be free. Younger voters, college graduates, first-time voters, renters. But if you look at the Cuomo vote, he got Jewish voters, non-college educated working class voters, and independents. And interestingly, a lot of them said that they were not voting for Cuomo because they liked him, but because they were voting against Mamdani. And I think that is a little bit of a warning message for Democrats as they come out of what is otherwise a great night. Is what they learned last night is that anti-Donald Trump does still sell if you do it in the right circumstances. And they learned that talking to voters about affordability mattered. But this split in the party is still very, very real. And the progressives are going to take this and they're going to run with it across the country. But it isn't necessarily going to sell in areas outside of New York City. And I think that to take the Mamdani victories and even these others and to think that they've now solved their question of what this party looks like going forward would be a mistake.
The big question for Mamdani will be how he governs. And does he have a pragmatic streak governance? Does he have the ability to look and say, you know what, 1% of the taxpayers in New York City pay 40% of the income tax revenue. Maybe we don't want to send them all to Connecticut, New Jersey, or Florida. What does he do about policing? He says he's going to reappoint Jessica Tisch as police commissioner. That would be smart. But if I were Jessica Tisch, I would say, Mr. Mayor, here are my terms. And it means not doing the things that you campaigned on or that you spent your career talking about by demeaning police. But here's what we need to do to make sure that crime keeps going down, as it has under her watch. So maybe she doesn't take the job. And then what does Mamdani do? So there's a real issue. I mean, if free buses that are supposed to be fast, by the way, are filled with homeless people and nobody wants to go on them, that's going to be nationwide news because New York is going to be covered by the press. So I think there's some real questions here about whether Mamdani, give him credit for this. He's an appealing candidate. He's offering a lot of wonderful promises, almost enough to say, yeah, socialism sure sounds good. And then, but it will clash with reality pretty quickly. And how he handles that, I think, is going to be the test of whether he can succeed politically.
Right. And part of the answer may depend on how much resistance he gets from other elements of the city and the state. And the signs there, I think, are not super encouraging. So Kathy Hochul, for example, coming out to his rally in Queens, saying that she is excited to work with him on his universal child care plan. By the way, he wants both universal child care and he wants to raise pay for child care workers to be on par with public school teachers. No suggestion yet about where that money is supposed to come from. Kathy Hochul keeps saying also that she's not planning to raise taxes. But look at, just compare the bully pulpits of these figures. I get that Kathy Hochul is the governor of New York State, which is broader and has an audience, but the limelight will be on Mamdani. And if he goes and starts tick-tocking about why we need to raise taxes, is the legislature in Albany going to go with him? I tend to think he's going to be pretty persuasive to a lot of those lawmakers. And then is Kathy Hochul prepared to stand in the way? I wouldn't bet on it.
All right. So big picture, bottom line, it seems to me that the Democratic Party, contrary to all of the media speculations that it was dying a slow death, has not died, and it's back. And it never was. I mean, that's always the press does. Every time there's a sweep after a presidential election, and the press is always wants to write the obituary of the minority party, and they always come back because the public is dissatisfied and they're looking for, and if they don't like the performance of the people who win, they throw the bums out, which is what they should do. The warning for Republicans is that in my mind, Kim, is that, and I'm going to give you the last word, this mega movement triumphalism, which is permanent Republican majority. We the working class are now ours forever. Hispanics are coming our way. The black men coming our way. Sorry, it's a temporary lease. And maybe a short-term temporary lease on those votes. So, get your act together on prices, dump the tariffs or minimize them if you can't dump them all together. Minimize the ICE raids and focus on prices and the economy, or you're going to lose.
Yeah, it's the economy, stupid, to go back to the old phrase. And they have been, somewhat ignoring that to their peril. The other thing that I would add to that, Paul, and this is probably whistling in the wind, but having some sort of consistent message would also be useful too. Now, that's a lot to ask from this president in the White House. And a lot has been done. Look, I mean, we write a lot of editorials, for instance, about good deregulation that's been going on in Washington. There were some benefits from the biggest one, actually stopping huge tax increases that were coming, that was part of their reconciliation bill. We never hear about any of that because it's the day-to-day kind of, I just solved 8 wars and just jumping around, and my tariffs are the best thing ever. And I don't think voters know what to make of this Republican majority. What they do know to make of is their electricity bills and their gas bills, and what it costs when they go to the grocery store. And until there's some meaningful progress and change, which Republicans are going to have to, like you said, dump tariffs or deal with them, more certainty in the market, voters are going to continue to point the finger at the people who are actually running things in Washington.
All right, Republicans, you have your challenge. We'll leave it at there today. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you all for listening. We are here every day on Potomac Watch.